Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the movie discussion, Pocket Dimension, where time does not exist and the only thing that matters is film. Now, if time did exist, you could accuse us of being late, but since it doesn't, we're not. So that's Jay and I'm Cole, and we're happy to be here to bring you our next installment in our Masters of Film series. This time going over back to Sweden, where a place we've been a few times. Actually, not too long ago, we were doing Let the Right One In, for instance.
Oh.
And we've also done, what's it called? The original Insomnia, which was a Swedish/Norwegian production. But once again, now we're going to Sweden's obviously most famous filmmaker and one of the premier filmmakers and some say artists of the 20th century, Ingmar Bergman. And true to form, as we said, we didn't want to necessarily, when we did this series, do all the more obvious ones. So this is one that's a little less known, less heralded when people think of his work, his canon there. And this is 1968's Hour of the Wolf, which came to me. I'd seen it before, so it's one of the reasons why it popped into my head about whether or not it would be good for us to do. We talked a lot. I know I really like Persona. Persona is a little bit heavy, but honestly, I feel like even though nobody mentions it anywhere, because actually they say that Hour of the Wolf had sort of two kind of spiritual successors to it in the next couple of years, Shame and The Passion of Anna. They're all sort of part of a thematic trilogy, as you call them. I always thought that, and I haven't seen those to know, but I always felt like this movie actually has a lot of themes in common with Persona, just done in a different way. Persona is a movie about two women and sort of how they imprint on each other and how they kind of get caught up and their psyches kind of intermingle to the point where you don't know where one begins and the other ends and that kind of thing and the effect they have on each other. And it's done in, I'm not going to say a straightforward way because it's not, but it's a psychological type movie. But this movie is kind of like that too, but just taking a bit more liberties with maybe some perhaps supernatural elements or at least surrealistic elements going on here. And they even state it outright in the movie. You have the artist's wife talking about how, when two people have been together for so long, they start to resemble each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then the coda or at the end of the film is her mentioning that again, saying, was this a shared psychosis? Was I so wrapped up with him that I started to experience the same things? And that's very much what's going on here. So this is kind of cool in that it's like it's a surrealistic psychological thriller, even kind of horror type film. But what's different about it is that it really subverts the conventions of those sorts of movies in that it's kind of minimalistic and does not rely on special effects for the most part. There's a few things sort of, but they're very small, not really a big deal going on. So we've got the story of the artist Johan living on a somewhat isolated small island with his wife, and we get an opening narrative from her addressing the audience directly, talking about how he had disappeared, and now she's going to recount the events leading up to his disappearance. And very early on, you get a sense for what kind of character he is. He's very much the tortured artist, and you find out he has a lot of contempt for society and people, and he's not a people person in general. And so he really wanted to live on this island so he could be, cut off from all that. And it's supposed to be understood that they're alone on the island, and there's an early scene where they go down to the beach to meet a boat that has brought in some supplies. So obviously every once in a while they had to get some supplies from the mainland. Folie à deux would be it's a French term for that phenomenon of what is it, like overlapping psyches type thing. Yeah. Jay did some research there. So yeah, that's right. It's a psychological term that is sometimes used for that. Folie à deux. But yeah, so this is Max von Sydow, who was in a lot of work by Ingmar Bergman. It's funny, like he's still around. He's still doing movies all these years later. He's in Star Wars: The Force Awakens, for instance.
Oh.
He's the old man that Poe Dameron is meeting at the beginning of that movie. So all these years later, still doing movies, which is pretty cool. And like a lot of
Oh, I'm
Sorry, go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like a lot of like these European actors, you know, they have sort of a prolonged career in Europe where nobody knows them. Then eventually, later on, they cross over and they start doing, you know, North American Hollywood productions, etc.
Wasn't he the priest in The Exorcist?
I think so.
Wasn't he Merlin? Or
He was one of the
Marin?
priests.
Marin.
Oh, is that the main guy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe that was his big crossover moment.
He looked a lot older than he actually was at the time. I don't know, some sort of makeup, I think.
Yeah, they must have.
The age he looked in the 78, whatever year that was, he looks about as old as he does now.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, just on a sort of an unrelated thing. I was reading about the comedian Red Fox, or whatever his name is.
Huh.
He died in 1991, and he was 68 years old, right? But it's funny because like he was most famous in the 70s,
Right.
and he seemed to be playing a much older character back then. Because he'd, you know, I'm coming, Elizabeth, and he'd fake a heart attack. But he only would have been in, I guess, his 40s.
40s, yeah.
Doing that, you know, and yet you think of like he's obviously an old man doing this bit. So yeah, I guess there's a few times where sometimes actors do that for a role where they wind up playing somebody quite a bit older than they actually are. It's probably a lot easier. It's easier to make an actor look older than look younger, I think.
Yeah.
For the most part. But yeah, Max von Sydow. I'm just trying to get the thing here showing how many he actually did with Ingmar Bergman, because it's quite a few. Certainly a lot of the big ones. Because like he's the main guy, for instance, in The Seventh Seal. He's the knight. So yeah, quite a few. So he'd already worked with him before that, and yeah, eventually, yeah, as you said, he was Marin in The Exorcist, which seemed to be his first, big sort of crossover into, I guess, English language type movie and stuff. And then, you know, since then he's just been a staple. He's all over the place. He played Ming the Merciless in Flash Gordon movie, which is pretty funny. King Osric in Conan the Barbarian.
Oh man, he was Ming in Flash Gordon.
Yeah. I mean, talk about a career. He was in Strange Brew, for God's sakes.
Wow, man.
Dune. I never heard of The Wolf at the Door, but there's another movie with Wolf in the title. He played Vigo in Ghostbusters 2, you know, the evil painting.
Wow, I forgot that was him too. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
He was one of the bad judges in Judge Dredd, or one of the mean judges anyway. He was like the highest judge, Judge Fargo and Judge Dredd. So, man, he was in that Spanish movie Intacto that I saw years ago. I don't remember that though. And obviously, I saw him recently because I watched Minority Report not too long ago. But, yeah,
he was the bad guy in Minority Report, right? The head director of the.
Yeah, he was the guy that was trying to frame him and to cover up his crime and stuff. And so yeah, all over the place, you know. And he's in Martin Scorsese, Ridley Scott, Shutter Island, Robin Hood, you know. So just a crazy long career. All over the place, and yeah, but first starting off with a few big, big now, I guess. I don't know if they're big at the time. Ingmar Bergman things going on. Seventh Seal, Wild Strawberries, The Magician, The Virgin Spring, and Hour of the Wolf, and then Shame and The Passion of Anna. So Jesus, all those, which is pretty cool. But I was gonna say. Oh yeah, Wild Strawberries. Wild Strawberries is one of the other big ones. It's probably the only Ingmar Bergman film I've seen that I didn't really like. Really? I just could not really get into it. I found it a little dull. Like I knew it was, you know, not exactly riveting. It was more of a drama type thing because it's just about an aged college professor who's, I think, retired at this point. He's taking a trip to, I think, a ceremony where they're going to honor him or give him an award. And along the way, he meets people and he sort of reminisces about his life. And there's nothing wrong with it or anything like that. It just didn't. Yeah, it's one I'll probably have to watch again because it didn't really do much. But of those movies, you know, I've seen The Magician. That's another one. Probably the three I really thought of because we were limiting. We'll probably want to Seventh Seal or Persona. I was thinking either this one, The Virgin Spring, or The Magician. Virgin Spring is kind of well known. I think it's most notable in that horror fans will know it because it's the film that basically inspired Last House on the Left. Last House on the Left is basically that kind of plot, just in a different place. The Virgin Spring is like medieval Sweden or something like that, but it's sort of a similar type deal. You've got a family that has like a young daughter, and while she's out, she gets accosted by these brigands who rape her and murder her, and then those same guys, by twist of fate, wind up staying at the house. Then they find out, etc., etc. So, yeah, so that's actually the inspiration for Last House on the Left, kind of a landmark horror movie in 1972. The Magician was the other one that I thought the hardest about, because I always thought Hour of the Wolf and Magician are two that never really come up and people don't really know about. And they're both really interesting. But in the end, I decided this one was a little closer thematically. Not that we need them to all link up or anything like that, but it's just because we had just done for our Kurosawa episode, we just done Throne of Blood.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this has some interesting sort of parallels with Throne of Blood, with ghosts or spirits and stuff like that. And it's black and white, yada, yada. I don't know. Not too much. Actually, it's more because towards the end of the Kurosawa one, we were talking about other Japanese filmmakers, and we were talking about Ugetsu. Ugetsu is kind of a lot like this in that it also has like actual ghosts and stuff. But Ugetsu is a longer, more complicated movie than this. And this is more minimalistic. And again, really relying on surrealism. But even though Max von Sydow is the main guy in it, I was more impressed by the actress.
Yeah, I agree.
I really like her performance a lot. Find her name here. Liv Ullmann. Yeah, I just thought she had this great sort of intensity and sort of sincerity right from the beginning. I mean, at the beginning, she is breaking the fourth wall, more or less, just talking to the audience, which can be clunky. But I didn't think but I thought she did such a great job that it wasn't clunky. There's a real, like I said, intensity to it, sort of thing.
Yeah,
I really liked.
So yeah, I really enjoyed the way they did that. To give us all that exposition, rather quickly in the the diary format. It works. I think it works well.
Yeah. The opening
like
is a little odd, though, isn't it? That they open with the film crew stuff.
Yeah.
I don't really know what they're going for. He did it again for another movie, although I can't remember which one. And like you said, is this just them padding? Because for those that don't know, when the film opens with the opening credits, we don't get a soundtrack or anything leading us in. What we get is we hear the audio of the film crew sort of getting ready for the next shot. And then it just basically opens with Ingmar Bergman's voice himself, like getting ready to call action. And then it starts, which is
I guess a stylistic choice.
Yeah, stylistic choice. Although I can't really figure out if it really means anything, or I couldn't really find a way to say link it into say the subject matter or anything like that. But maybe I could just be overthinking it. Sometimes it's like, as you said, stylistic choice is stylistic choice. Sometimes just because it doesn't have to have some greater meaning behind it. But
it was the easiest thing to do at the time, or whatever.
The only thing I can think of is, like I said, given that this is sort of like psychological thriller / horror and stuff, and I talked about how its style is somewhat about subverting kind of expectations. You can sort of maybe apply that to the opening too, and that instead of having like sort of like a spooky, haunting opening, instead it's just very sparse and realistic, and then they jump us into the world of the film. It's kind of a weird disconnect there, but sure, why not? So yeah, I know beforehand when we were talking, you said you didn't really know what to make of it, and I understand that, in that like it's one of those movies that's really open-ended as far as what you can take out of it. Like, it's not one of those films that's hitting you over the head and making you draw a conclusion. It really tries to be ambiguous about a lot of stuff so that we can draw our own conclusions. So what did you think about it, having seen it for the first time?
It's like I told you before the show. I definitely enjoyed it more than I thought I would. It's something I think I need to rewatch again to really get a proper understanding of it. I've seen, this is maybe my third Bergman film that I've seen,
Yeah.
but it's something I wanted to mention to you. This is on that. I think I said this maybe last week. What was his name?
Film Archive, or is it?
It's no. I actually saw this on YouTube, but this is
Yeah, that was
included.
the first thing that popped up when I looked.
This is included among the 1001 movies to see before you die by
Oh,
Steven
okay.
Schneider. And would you like to take a guess on how many Bergman films are on that list?
If this is on there, there's got to be a lot.
Yeah,
There's got to be like 7 or 8, probably.
it's 11.
Wow. Because, like I said, this is one that usually doesn't really get included when people talk.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking if they included this one, pretty much all the ones I named would also be on there then. Something that's kind of weird about Bergman's career, and I don't know if it's because a quirk of being from Sweden or what, is that a lot of his later stuff was made for television movies, which to us makes it sound like, oh, then to us it sounds like a drop in quality or something like that. But I don't really understand how that worked. I'll have to read more about his career, but it wasn't like his career or reputation had diminished. It was more like just a different choice he was making. I don't know. But pretty much everything he did when he got older in like the 80s and 90s, and including his last movie in 2006, were all made for TV movies. But at least a couple of them are still, quite well ranked or received or whatever like that, like highly regarded. So it's not like they were just, made for TV fodder. But it just sounds weird because, I mean, if I think of that with another filmmaker, it just seems like, oh, that's a decline. Now they just wind up doing TV stuff.
In our eyes, just because that's how it is now, it seems like that's a step down. But
Right.
I mean, maybe he did it for the creative control, or just to be left alone to do his little movie. Maybe he can do more projects that he enjoys like that.
Yeah, as early as 1975, he did a film version of Mozart's opera The Magic Flute, and that was a television production. And I guess that was always the intention, to make it a television production. Although I don't really know why, but that was the idea at home. Let's see here. Yeah, the work is widely viewed as one of the most successful films of an opera ever made. But yeah, they point out an unusual item in the director's oeuvre. But yeah, I've seen scenes from that before. I remember watching, I don't know, some documentary that was just about filmmakers years ago, and they were in the section they were talking about Bergman. They showed some of it. Kind of cool. But getting back to Hour of the Wolf, this is more in line with what's sort of typical of him, in that he wrote most of his movies, and this one he also wrote the script for. And I'm not sure, because there's not really a distinction exactly when it started to happen, but later in his career, he kind of didn't write too much dialogue. What he would do is just write the scene with sort of the idea what the dialogue's going to be. Then he would tell his actors to just sort of improvise based on that. I don't know if there's any of that going on in this film or not. This might be too early for that, but that is something he did later on in his career, where I guess he just felt like he would rather leave it up to the actors to come up with the dialogue. I don't know.
Doesn't that sound like completely opposite of a lot of other guys we're going to talk about coming up soon?
Yeah, because as we said, when we talk about a lot of these directors, like, even though they're seen as geniuses or really talented or whatever, a lot of it comes with them being kind of tyrannical control freaks, and they want to control every single aspect of what's going on. But like you said, this is almost kind of a laissez-faire kind of attitude, where it's just like, well, this is the gist of the dialogue, but you guys figure it out, So yeah, that does make him quite different.
I guess if you have talented actors that you trust, I mean, hell, it's, go for it.
Yeah, and as we pointed out, there's a couple here that, at least in this movie, where he, worked with them multiple times, Max von Sydow and Liv Ullmann. At this point, he'd worked with both of them before, and he would work with them again. So, and even though there are other characters in the film, they're sort of like the core characters as we get into it. So the crux of the movie is, and it's funny that you said, you found it was a little, you were surprised you liked it more than you thought you would. It was kind of the other way around for me when I watched this a few years ago, because whatever I'd read about it beforehand, didn't properly set up the way the movie was actually going to unfold. For some reason, I read it as like, okay, this is like some guy's like descent into madness.
Yeah.
And, you know, I thought it would just be more, I don't know, edgy or in your face or something like that. And like, I was about halfway through the movie before things started to like make sense to me from that angle. And I was like, oh, okay, this is what they're doing. Because at first, like, yeah, I thought Hour of the Wolf was more about him like going crazy, and it kind of is, but it's just kind of not in the way that you might think. I guess if you read the descriptions I had read, it sort of took me aback at the time. But I really enjoyed it again, seeing it this time now that I kind of knew everything that was going to happen. So yeah, eventually we're going to encounter other characters on this island that really upset him, and he even talks about them earlier on. And that's the other thing, if you don't know what's going on, because he talks about like how he dreams of these people, and then he would make sketches of them. And there's a part early in the film where he's showing his wife the sketches, and he's describing the people to her, and you know, they have some really weird details about them. And one is like, there's an old woman. He says like, if she takes off her hat, her face comes off too, and you know, weird stuff like that. And everything's done so gradually that at first, like, I think most people don't really think, oh, it's already happening. You just think, oh, there's other people on the island. And as I said, there's different ways to take it. I think the main way is that these people he's been seeing in his dreams have manifested themselves as ghosts or demons or whatever like that, and now they are physically on the island interacting with him and, you know, pulling him in different directions. The movie is very much, you know, kind of a literal case of somebody being consumed by their own inner demons. That's really what's going on here. And some of it's kind of difficult to extrapolate, but some of it isn't that hard either, because, you know, they're all upper class kind of bourgeois people. And obviously, that's the type of people he kind of just has the most contempt for. He's an artist, and he can't stand these people that don't value his work for what it is. They only value it from a sort of a social standpoint. You know, whatever's in might elevate them in the eyes of society. Like, oh, this kind of art is very, you know, very hot and popular right now. I'm so glad to have it. It'll make me look cool and stuff like that. And that's what he hates the most. And that's what he's dealing with. And then the other sort of thing going on, besides that, is he's haunted by the memory of a past lover, of Veronica Volgan, who he was with for 5 years before being with his current wife. And that's where I think she starts to get drawn into it too, because she's haunted by it too. This is actually kind of a little bit like Rebecca that we did a little while ago, in that she is haunted by this because Veronica was a well-known beauty that she feels she can't measure up to, and feels like, you know, she's still casting her shadow over her, blah, 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 that kind of thing. And I think that's really the thing that pulls her into it, so that she starts to experience the same thing he is the looming specter or whatever of Veronica Volgan. They're never very exactly clear on what it was. I remember there's a part where they're at the castle and he's talking to the other people, and they say something like, oh, it was a great scandal at the time. I don't really know why it was a scandal. They don't really give us background details of exactly why it was a scandal, but he was with this woman. Maybe she was married. I don't know. I don't think they say. So that's one other thing that's left to the imagination, exactly what it is. True. Like there's certain things in the movie, obviously we're not sure if they're happening or how they're being perceived, but that is true. That was in the past. He was in a relationship with Veronica Volgan for 5 years, but again, what the details of that exactly were kind of left to the imagination, I suppose. So yeah, you've got on one level you can say that these upper class spirits or whatever like that, they're pointing out his contempt for these consumers of art that only care about it on, you know, shallow levels. And then you can say being in society with these people is sapping his artistic energy, and then, you know, metaphorical sense. But then if you want to go in a literal sense, they are like demons or ghosts or whatever, and they're literally sapping his life energy out of him, and he starts to come apart because of it. And credit to his wife, because she seems to recognize what's going on fairly quickly, actually. She even tells him, there's a part where after they'd visited the first time, she just says, you know, I'm with you. I'm going to, you know, we're going to see this through together. I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to drag you down with them, but, you know, you'll be strong if you're with me, et cetera, like that. So you could also see them as like supernatural beings that are as physical as Johann or Alma, there to like suck his life force out. So those interpretations are left to the imagination of whoever's watching, about whether or not these people are like how much of reality they're actually experiencing and how much is their own psychosis, blah blah blah. Because at a certain point, Alma starts to see the same things, and they have kind of a shared delusion, which I guess comes from her being so wrapped up in his artistic world that she seems to feel like she seems to have this permanent feeling of not being good enough for. Like, it's clear to her that Veronica was more, in her mind, Veronica was much more fitting as the wife or lover or whatever of a really talented artist. I think she feels like she's like doesn't measure up. She's not as good a companion to, say, a really talented artist. Like, she's worried that she's not understanding him enough. And that's one of the reasons why she gives him so much leeway. Like, when he gets really upset and stuff like that, she doesn't get mad at him or anything like that. She tries her best to understand him and sympathize with him and all this. Like, you can tell she's just really going out of her way to try to empathize with him and see things from his point of view because she does love him so much.
Right, and kind of her own insecurities.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe help fuel her shared hallucinations or
right, like
delusions.
As you said, like, so these demons, ghosts, whatever, like they come from different places for each of them. For him, it's sort of a manifestation of all the things he like hates and has contempt for, and sort of causes him to I don't want to say self-loathing, but makes him frustrated about his own line of work. Like, where he's like, I'm an artist, I want to create, but what's the point if it's just going to go to a bunch of assholes like this? Which is, something we see every now and again. I think some people figure that's kind of why Kurt Cobain killed himself, was that he became disillusioned with the idea that his band was so popular that, it was just being consumed on a mass scale by plenty of people that he didn't have any respect for, and figured actually didn't care about the music on the deep level he did, et cetera, et cetera. That's up to debate whether or not, but that's a good example. That's an example, I guess, I can give. So
from an artist perspective, versus wanting to be a performing a musician, I guess, career musician versus wanting to be an artist first. So
yeah,
that's interesting. I never thought about it like that. Maybe that's why he did that.
Yeah. So for him, the demons are about that kind of stuff. And for her, as you said, the demons are a lack of confidence,
mm-hmm.
and worrying about not being good enough and not being a good muse. That's women want their partners of artists. They want to be their muse. They want to inspire them and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And she feels like she's let him down in this way. And she seems, I guess, at the beginning, she seems sort of reluctant to pose for him. Like, he says, I want you to pose for me. And she seems sort of startled by it. So, they've been together for a few years, and apparently it's not something he's often asked her to do. So she wants to do it right for him.
Yeah. She says no quite a few times.
Yeah, she does. Again, I just feel like she's just sort of uncomfortable with that. Even though she wants to be that for him, she just feels like she doesn't measure up and can't do it. So, yeah, there's a pretty heavy dynamic going on here with their relationship, and a woman's ideas of what a partner should be, specifically, especially like a partner to somebody who's a creative talent, et cetera, et cetera. There's some stuff in there that's reminds me a little bit of some of the feminism stuff that would show up in the plays of Henrik Ibsen, the Norwegian playwright. In fact, there's actually one called Ghosts that this makes me think of. Here it is. I actually own like 3 or 4 copies of this. I bought this several times, not forgetting that I owned it. A Doll's House is probably the one that most people hear about when they hear about Gibson. Ghosts and A Doll's House are different plays, but they both play out the same way, that like by the end everything is terrible. It's like a bunch of secrets are revealed and everything is just awful. Henrik Ibsen, with his dramas were very bleak. It's usually it's about some sort of household with a family dynamic or people with lovers, and suddenly secrets start coming out, and by the time things are over, everybody just wants to swallow a bullet. more or less. And this film is kind of like that too, but in a more overt, expressive way. Surrealism, etc., etc. More external, I suppose, like that. But one sequence that's really weird is, when he recounts his story about the encounter with the boy to her. Because again, what are we supposed to make of that? Did that really happen, or does he just think it happened? Did something similar happen, but he didn't go as far? Like, did he just have an encounter with the boy, but he didn't actually do anything, and he just wanted to kill him? Or did he really just murder some kid out on the beach for almost no reason? This is one of the times where they don't really tell us, so we're just supposed to speculate.
Yeah, I was curious about that myself.
That was definitely the thing that surprised me the most the first time I saw the movie. It just felt really out of nowhere. And the music started getting really ominous, and I'm like, no, it's not going to go there. And then it doesn't seem to. And then you're like, okay. And then it does. Then suddenly they're struggling and everything like that, and you're like, what's going on?
What instigated that? He was mad about something.
I think it was just the kid kept messing with his stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like, he was going over to where, like, I don't know if it was art supplies or what, because he was fishing at the time, but he had, like, a bag or something over to the side that the kid seemed to insist on getting into or something. I mean, it wasn't really anything, that bad. But yeah, by the end of it, he's killing a kid, supposedly, or at least by the end of it, he feels like he has killed a kid, and she's just sort of shocked by it, and this is where he's feeling the pull to go back to the house again, and yeah, that great invitation where the ghost comes in and he's just like, and here's a gun, because, there's wildlife on the island. Within the next few minutes, he's shooting at Alma. Yeah. And at first, we don't get to see. As far as we know, he killed her. He runs off to the castle.
That's what I'm saying. It would be nice to watch it knowing that she's not dead at that point.
Yeah. Although, again, considering the way the movie's framed, you should be able to figure that out, right? Because she's telling you at the beginning. It's all flashback. So
Right.
But I forgot that the first time I watched it too. I wasn't thinking that way either. Like, I thought, oh, she really is dead. I really did think that the first time I watched it. But I think that the one thing you could take of all these things that are uncertain, and aren't spelled out for us, I think one thing that is true is that she wasn't dead. She didn't die.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether or not he died, I don't know. Did he die in the literal sense? Did he just go crazy? Did he disappear? I don't know. All that is left up to the imagination. Because it does end with, the ghosts who had been tormenting him for so long, just, on the psychological level, all these things they would say to him, and then talking about Veronica and talking about his art and all this stuff, and, all these psychological games they're playing. And I know it's not supposed to be funny, but the bit, again, where he goes back and they put the makeup on him and stuff to just sort of like emasculate him and humiliate him. So he's going in to meet Veronica, and he looks ridiculous. He has like lipstick on and stuff. And of course, she does wind up laughing at him. But I mean, in the end, after all that, it ends or it culminates with them, finally physically attacking him.
Mm-hmm.
And, then we're left up to the imagination of what that actually means. Was he finally driven insane? Did they actually somehow kill him? Blah, 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 type thing. But in any case, she can't find him anymore. He's gone. Mm-hmm. This is after he'd fled, and he's running out into the woods. But the movie's very clearly split into two parts, and what's kind of funny is once it hits part 2, that's when Hour of the Wolf comes up as a title. Bartimman or whatever like that. He tells Alma about it he tells her a few things before getting to the story about the encounter with the kid. And one of them is about, the Hour of the Wolf is the time of night where the most people die and most babies are born. And he talks about a traumatic moment from his childhood where his father winds up caning him after he's like locked in a closet or something, and tearfully apologizing to his mother and stuff like that. And then very quickly after the whole thing about the kid, it just escalates to where like he grabs the gun and shoots her 3 times, or shoots at her 3 times, as we find out.
Yeah. There at the end, when it starts going south, right when the lady takes her hat off and then takes her face off.
Yeah.
Right before she takes her face off, there's a really cool shot I like where they show another lady in the foreground or in the background when he's in the foreground, and it's really cool because she gives this like really weird smile. She looks like she knows what's about to happen, and he kind of freaks out.
Yeah. That's one of the only moments where they use some special effects.
Yeah.
A little big deal where she pulls it off, and it's funny. The woman next to him is just saying, "Oh, she's definitely using glue." She tries to hide it, but it's just glue. And then for the pièce de résistance, she takes the eyeballs and puts them in twin like wine glasses, which is really freaky.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he's going through this crazy psychological torment at this point, where they're just mocking him and terrorizing him. But yeah, it takes a little while for that to get going, but once it does, it's really cool and haunting and creepy and stuff like that. And yeah, so he thinks that he's being haunted again by the specter of the kid that he supposedly, allegedly, possibly killed, among all those other things going on. Hour of the Wolf. But yeah, so the party is up at this castle, which is pretty cool when you think about it, because like if they're not there, they're living on an island that just has like this big, scary abandoned castle on it. And there's a part where one of them puts on like a performance, where they do like some dance to some music and stuff like that. I didn't really know what that meant, unless it was just their own attempt at being artistic, and it annoyed him or something like that, maybe. I'm not really sure. He gives this really interesting speech when they ask him about what it is to be an artist, and he just says like, "Oh, that's just a label that I never asked for," blah 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 blah. And then when he finishes, they all applaud. They're like, "Oh, wonderful, wonderful, amazing!" They're mocking tones. So yeah, they talk about what was it when the first time one of them shows up? It appears to Alma, not him, which is sort of very telling. She's the one that tells him about him keeping the diary under the bed and stuff like that. But I think she's also the one that talks about there being a Birdman, which is one of the people he meets towards the end there, the Birdman, and all the birds flying around.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure how they achieved that. They must have used a lot of real birds, I assume. But he's the one that puts the makeup on him and puts him in the silk robe, which makes me think of the cover of that Rush album, where they're all wearing white silk kimonos, which is hilarious.
Now you are your true self.
Yeah, exactly. What is it? I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, like yeah. After Veronica's like laughing at him, and she gets up. He just says, "I thank you. The limit has finally been transgressed. The mirror has been shattered. But what do the splinters reflect?" That's the last thing to say before him. I'm trying to think. As we said, we've already gone over most of the meat of the film, so I'm just trying to think some other stuff about Bergman himself. As I said, they don't really mention this one as being similar to Persona, but I think it really is. Mm-hmm. Again, Persona relies less on horror and some of the spectacle, as we said here, with like birds and faces being come off and eyeballs popping out. The other is just more talking and stuff. But Persona is a really fascinating movie because it doesn't sound like it could really hold your attention for that long if it's really just two women. But they do a really excellent job of their interactions and stuff. And it was a really sort of risque movie for the time. Like, they talk about some kind of edgy stuff that would certainly not have gone over, say, in the US at the time. They would have censored the hell out of that if it had been an American movie in 1966. Especially if they're talking, she recounts like having a sexual encounter with underage boys on a beach, which is pretty out there. So Bergman was always ready to push the envelope, although, again, I don't really know if he saw it that way at the time. But yeah, a lot of his films are, have a lot of existential stuff going on about psychological things or things to do with religion and faith. Probably the one everybody gets wrong is like Seventh Seal, because a lot of people I think who haven't seen it think of it as kind of like the ultimate sort of artsy art house type movie. And it has some of those aspects, but it's really not. There's way more movies out there that do like that kind of stuff, way more pronounced than Seventh Seal. But I guess what the image everybody takes away from Seventh Seal is, yes, playing a game of chess with death. So, that's always going to be a really sort of powerful image as far as that goes in film when you're talking about when you're talking about those sorts of themes and stuff and artsy stuff. But yeah, I guess isolation and loneliness is sort of another one. In this one, it's not as important. It's like a self-imposed isolation because he's a guy that's kind of fed up with society, and he just wants to be removed from it. But it also sort of shows that it doesn't help. That he's gotten himself to this isolated area where it's just him and his wife, and he still can't escape because it's all in here. So I guess that's kind of a different sort of take on isolation. But in the other movies, it's usually about how the isolation breaks people down and stuff. Trying to remember The Magician now. The Magician is pretty interesting. It's probably not as deep. It probably doesn't have as many, things to say. It's more just kind of a kind of cool, interesting story. At least that was my understanding. And it's 10 years before this movie. It's not from 1958. It's just basically about, again, Max von Sydow. He's like this magician, and he's like got like a sort of a whole crew with him that travel around with him, and they wind up staying. They travel around the countryside doing doing shows for people in villages and stuff like that. And then there's a part where they're going to stay overnight at this place, and these people are sort of more scientific and stuff, and they want to expose them all as a bunch of frauds and stuff. And it's kind of like about how just the magician has some sort of outwits them. And it's pretty cool. It doesn't really have anything I can think of that's similar to this, except that it's got Max von Sydow in there. But it's an interesting movie, and it's probably, besides this one, the one I came closest to maybe choosing for the Bergman one. But I don't know. At the end of the day, it didn't feel like there was enough really to analyze. I mean, it's interesting and it's fun and stuff, but it's and kind of the same thing with The Virgin Spring. The Virgin Spring is more or less just about kind of revenge, as we've seen most revenge movies usually make that point, which is like, is revenge really a good idea? Does it really help? And that kind of stuff. And even though it doesn't shy away from stuff, it's not nearly as visceral as, say, Last House on the Left, which is just really different era, the 70s, going into that shock kind of culture. That's a movie I still have trouble watching because they put on such a great performance. It's so intense. And when I saw the remake a few years ago, which I had avoided watching for so long, I was like amazed by how like it couldn't match it at all. At least that's how I felt. Do you see the remake?
I did not.
What's that?
No.
Yeah, it's not worth it. Like, I thought, oh, okay, this is like 2007 or whatever it was. Oh, they're really going to up it. But they didn't, which I guess is good. But I don't know. For whatever reason, when I watch Last House on the Left, it actually disturbs me, which is kind of hard to do because it just felt really intense and genuine and stuff, like where I'm like, oh, God. Whereas the remake really did feel like I was just watching a movie. Kind of.
Yeah. It's
like, it still had intense violence and stuff going on, but for some reason it didn't feel as authentic to me for whatever reason. It didn't disturb me. It would just washed over me the way like a lot of, horror violence does in these movies, which isn't always a bad thing. But in the case of something like Last House on the Left, that's kind of the main point of the movie, to really push you out of your comfort zone and shock you with this violence and how it's perpetrated. For whatever reason, the remake, for me anyway, falls completely flat in that. Like, you're like, yeah, okay, she's gonna microwave his dick or whatever, but who cares? I don't know.
Well, it was too polished, for one thing.
I think that's a big part of it. Yeah.
It you know, it was kind of before its time for the subject matter and you know what it was trying to do. So, you know, what are we talking about? 40 years after the fact, they decided to remake it.
Yeah, quite a long time. Yeah.
So it's you can't capture that type of shock once it's already been done, and you do something that's not even nearly as shocking. Also,
yeah. Yeah, I was reading about some of the shocky stuff from that era. You know, stuff like a lot of the Italian directors and stuff were doing. Always made me want to watch that movie, the one that like everybody says is so awful. Even though most people say it's like the best, it's like even though it's horrible and deplorable how they did it, it's still a great lesson for people.
Cannibal Holocaust.
No, before Cannibal Holocaust, but these were Italian guys too. What is it? Farewell or Goodbye, Uncle Tom? It's a movie. Right, yeah. It's like a fake documentary about an Italian film crew from the 20th century that travel back in time to like the time of slavery to document it, and it was shot in Haiti. And I mean, you got to give them credit because it probably was a good representation of it. But like nowadays, like nobody would ask their actors to do that, and yet these were just a bunch of Haitian extras that willingly went through it. Although you wonder how willing. At the time, Haiti was being run by a dictator. In fact, the dictator was very happy with the movie. This is right before he died. I looked him up too. He must have died just a few months later. But he gave like them like full access to everything. He was really pleased to have them. And I guess he just told the Haitian extras, "Hey, you're going to be slaves in this. You're going to be naked, and we're going to simulate you getting whipped and beaten and sexually assaulted, and it's going to be awesome." Yeah. So I guess a few years ago, somebody screened it. I can't remember. One of those. Oh, Robert Rodriguez had screened it and stuff, and Eli Roth covered it or something. Yeah, I saw an interview on YouTube where Eli Roth was talking about it and stuff, and it really piqued my interest. And I saw they played a trailer for it, and even the trailer is pretty nuts. All the stuff it shows.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but it's a little different though. Like I don't want to say, I don't want to give people the wrong impression because yeah, okay. So like Cannibal Holocaust. It doesn't matter now because it's like forever ago. You're not endorsing it by watching. But if Cannibal Holocaust came out today, I would say don't watch it because it has animal cruelty and stuff like that. Whereas the stuff that happened to people wasn't real, although at the time people thought it was real to the point that the director actually got arrested for a little while because they thought somebody actually like fucking died. But no, people were harmed in in Cannibal Holocaust. Cannibal Holocaust also doesn't even have any cannibalism in it. But anyway, there are some scenes of cannibal cruelty and animal death. Basically, this film crew, just the actors themselves, like horribly murder several animals, the worst probably being the tortoise. What they do to that is just fucking awful. Now, and that's bad. Now, in the case of the other, it is simulated, but it's still so, again, visceral and degrading. It's not something that you would ever ask people to really go through. But as people have said, this gives it a certain level of authenticity because it really does show probably how bad slavery was at the time because, again, it was slavery. The people were regarded as property. Obviously, they went through horrible things like being physically abused and raped and all those things and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But still, like, the way they filmed it is just so on the nose that a lot of people like attacked the film and called it racist. Where the filmmakers themselves said it's the opposite of racist because we're shining a light on something terrible that really happened. So I get why it goes back and forth, but
it seems like it's the same discussion we're still having
right
today.
Exactly, but at least today I think it's much weaker because again today it's just normal sort of filmmaking stuff. Whereas this, I do get it. Like people saying like it's indefensible the way they did it, and I get it. But you can say all that, but it did achieve its goal and have sort of the proper effect. Like if you're horrified by it, good, because that's the point. Although the message I think really does get messed up because apparently the guys playing the Italian film crew who are documenting all this, they eventually do start to take part. Like, there's a scene where like one of them is like raping some like teenager and stuff like that, just because he knows he can get away with it. So I don't know. I haven't seen it in proper context, maybe, but just reading about it, I'm just like, what the hell is this telling us? Then they're supposed to be going back in time to say how to document how terrible it is, and now they're joining in. Like, so I don't know, but I don't know. Just
It's
have a
almost sounds like the Stanford prison experiment.
yeah.
Like,
They made a good movie of that too, but again, that's just a movie, and you know nobody actually had to go through anything bad in that.
yeah.
You know, you watch the Stanford Prison Experiment movie, you can go, oh, that's interesting, but you don't go, oh my god, because
I think I did see this movie, but I don't think I watched it all. It's kind of hard to watch.
yeah, for sure, because it's one of those Mondo films. That's the term we're just looking for, a Mondo film.
It's not a pleasant watch by any means. It was, I went through a phase. I was trying to seek out the this stuff that was supposed to be really shocking and all.
Yeah, exactly, and maybe that's what I'm in kind of right now, or at least what I've been reading about. And the movie's 2 hours, and it pretty much doesn't let up.
Yeah,
like it's just like scene after scene of like the slaves just going through horrible stuff.
Yeah, I learned that I don't really get a lot of entertainment out of watching stuff like that. So I really stopped doing that because, I like, violence in movies, as much as anyone, but it has to have some sort of a story in there also, because it's just not fun for me to watch.
Probably the funniest reaction to the movie at the time of people flipping out were people who were like white nationalists flipping out because they thought like this will incite a race war. Because that's the whole thing too. So this all had an end sequence that didn't have anything to do with the rest of the movie that they made them cut out. But the original ending was okay. So there was this book written back in the 50s or something called The Confessions of Nat Turner. Nat Turner was a real guy back in like the 1830s who was a slave and stuff who led a failed revolt. The book itself is a fictionalized version of that, and some people praise it and some people dump all over it because they make it seem like he's just like an idiot that just got a bunch of people killed because he was, incompetent and stuff like that. I don't really know the details of the real Nat Turner, but anyway, so the end sequence in this was sort of a version of that, but instead it was set in the present, and I think it's like in Florida, and it just has like a 20th century version of Nat Turner like going around like murdering all the white people he can find for like a 15-minute sequence. And anyway, the distributors made them cut that because they're like, that's going to start a race war. But so that's outside of the rest of it. It's just like this weird coda to a movie that's already really shocking and offensive and deplorable anyway. And then they have this tacked on bit that's not exactly related, but kind of, that's so bad that they make them remove it. So that's kind of funny.
We're talking 71. This is like when blaxploitation was exploding. So
yeah, I mean, the 70s was like the decade of like exploitation on every level. Blaxploitation, the kung fu exploitation, sleaze. This is the sleaze and shock and everything. And as we said, the era of the Mondo films and stuff I got going. I saw the original one that started it all, the one I think that was just called like Mondo or whatever it was, which is, the documentary or, the shockumentary where they just show, various clips of stuff. The only part that was really hard for me was like Taiwan where they're like skinning dogs. Just pretty fucking awful.
Is that like Faces of Death or something?
The earliest one was called Mondo Cane. It's from like it predates everything. It's like it's the thing that kicked it all off. It's from like I think 62. And all it is just a bunch of unrelated sequences that like they shot footage of in various countries. And a lot of it has like, some shocking violence and stuff like that. It just jumps all over the place. It's not all of it is violent. Like at one point they show Rudolph Valentino statue and stuff. I don't know. There's just stuff all over the place. It jumps all over the place.
It sounds like something now would be just like a video on rotten.com or something.
Pretty much, yeah. That sounds exactly like what it would be nowadays. But again, back then, one of the reasons why it was shocking was because, well, way before you had access to this, right? So yeah, so that's kind of what started the whole Mondo thing. It was called Mondo Cane, and it spawned something just called Mondo, which is basically shockumentary. type stuff, which led into all this stuff. But and I of course do have a weird fascination with it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I do too. It's like when I was a kid, it was Faces of Death. That was like the end all
Right.
be all.
Sure.
Because you had a limited selection of what you could actually get your hands on. So that was all we'd somebody would rent it or have a bootleg copy or whatever, and we'd watch it. Which that stuff is just. I mean, the shocking stuff is real, and it's not pleasant. It's
No.
it's like brain surgery or like
Yeah. I've seen
killing,
some of it. The guy
killing.
that shoots himself, and
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen a few of those things. Yeah, there's nothing to get out of it.
Yeah, man, I've watched some of the beheading videos from like ISIS and stuff, and
I haven't watched those. Thank God.
That's stuff you can't unsee.
Yeah.
Really, when you see real violence, it's so like uncinematic versus
Right. Exactly.
in a movie, it's something like really. I mean, that's shocking to me because it's really not spectacular at all. It's I don't know.
Yeah, I remember seeing like footage from like China where it's late at night and they're in like one of the little places in the building where the ATM is, like inside, and the guy's like waiting at the guy at the ATM. Just out of nowhere, the guy like pulls out this big knife and just really fast starts stabbing the guy next to him. You're like, holy shit!
Like, have you seen the video of it's? I think the guy's a politician or something. He's doing a live press conference.
Yeah, he's the one who shoots himself at the end.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've seen that. It also has the one where, again, in Asia, I think it's in Vietnam or something, they're lining them up and shooting them in the back of the head and stuff. As you say, it's just so abrupt and uncinematic.
Yeah, I can't think of the right word for it that I'm looking for, but it's eye opening.
Yeah. Well, that's what I always say. Like when I talk, I love violence in movies, especially stylized violence and stuff like that. But yeah, there's a really big difference. And one of the things that is a staple of a lot of sort of action movies, and is usually kind of even a lighthearted moment in some of them, like in one of my movies, like Universal Soldier, which I love so much, is like the bar fight. Like, here's a bar fight. It's a good old time, and nobody's really going to get hurt. It's just a fight in a bar and stuff. I've been in bar fights, man, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. But yeah, I've been in like 5 bar fights, and they're not fun to be in or around at all. They're fucking scary.
They're a mess, and yeah, it's people get hurt too.
And I'm really lucky that in 2 of them I didn't get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
One guy was gonna like smash a bottle over my head. I kicked a chair into his shins, and he went down. One of my friends did get a bottle in the head, but not on that. I wasn't there for that one. That wasn't really a fight. He was just going down the stairs. The guy came up behind him. That was a whole thing. That was a lawsuit and everything. But yeah, I mean, people get hurt. I remember one of my friends got sucker punched, and that was it for him for the night. Like he had a shiner. Like if you're not ready for a punch, it can really do damage. Like he was throwing up later and stuff, and it wasn't because he was drinking. Like it wasn't some tough guy that hit him either. It was just some old guy. Well, he was old for a bar. He was probably like 45. I don't know what the hell he's doing.
He probably does this every night of the week too.
Yeah, I know. Just
goes out and starts.
We were like 21 or 22 or something. He just popped him. I can't even remember what was going on. It was just out of nowhere. He popped him in the face.
He hates his life so much. He has to go try to sucker punch youngsters.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, in a way, like that bar was such a shithole. We were almost asking for it.
Yeah.
It was such a grub bar, but dive bar, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
It's long since gone.
I've never actually been in anything serious like that, but
I've been in 2 of the fights I was in. They were kind of like movies in that like a whole bunch of people were involved. Where it was like one of those chain reactions where somebody else gets pushed and it's like, hey, now they're into it. Like, yeah, I was in 5 of them, and 2 of them were like big clusterfucks.
Mm-hmm.
Where like people were they didn't even know what was going on. They were just swinging. Type thing, and yeah, it sounds funny, but it's not funny to be in the middle of it at all.
And we were in a bar in New Orleans one time, and some friends of mine, and I don't even know what happened, but some guy had an aluminum baseball bat. Jesus! Hit one of my friends upside the head, and he caved the entire side of his head in, so he had to, he has a plate there now.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's.
I mean, that could kill you for that.
That's like attempted murder, man.
Yeah, pretty much a bat to the head.
I mean, I don't even think hitting somebody with a beer bottle is cool. You know, I mean, if you're gonna
No.
fight, use your fists. You know, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Back when men were men.
A couple of the girl ones I got were instigated by women.
Of course. Telling their boyfriend to kick his ass or something. Yeah.
Threw a drink in someone's face, and it just went crazy. That was one of the only ones I saw how it started. Usually you don't get the luxury of seeing how it started unless you're at the start of it. Like, I'm on the peripheral of it, and I notice one of my friends is suddenly in the area. I'm like, oh shit, I need to do something. Yeah. And stuff like that. Mostly what I did was just sort of move in and out, shove some people. Like, the only blow I landed was, one of them, I was coming at me, and I kicked the chair, and the chair went into his shins, which was good.
It's that pack mentality, I guess.
That's what it is, though. You ask Ryan sometime. We had the worst luck when it came to that kind of thing. My friends were dumb when they went drinking, but they weren't like, hey, let's go get in fights. Like, they were just normal dumb. And yet they, several times, and a few times without me, would just get into situations. And they weren't like standoffish guys or, hey, look, like none of them were. I mean, I think I told you that story about the other Ryan, how he was flipping out and cursing at that big Indian guy. Like, he deserved to get shit kicked out of him, and luckily he didn't. But he deserved it.
The guy was cool about it.
Yeah, the guy was totally cool about it.
Mm-hmm.
We were in the pizza place down the street, and he was just smashing and stuff like that. I can't even remember what started, but the guy was, and he's a big guy, but this Indian was massive. He was probably like 6'3", 6'4", like 300 pounds. Like, he wasn't, a bodybuilder, but he was a big guy, right? And, like, I don't know, like, what he did. He, like, pushed him or something and said, like, hey, he called him a fucking squaw, is what he called him, right? Oh. And we're like, oh, God. Like, we're waiting for this guy to pull over. And the guy just goes, hey, I think your homie there had too much to drink there. And we're like, oh, my God, we're so sorry. We're so sorry. And he's just like, fuck you, blah, blah, blah. And the guy was just totally chill about it. And he would have, like, I would have not have blamed him at all if he, punched my friend's lights out. Like, he totally deserved it. On the same night, he went outside with his pizza and smeared it all over somebody's windshield. And then that guy came and yelled at him, and he yelled back at him. But that guy wasn't as big and scary, so he just yelled him down. So I was like, what are you doing? You're like, so that was indefensible. He was just being a total asshole. But usually my friends were not like that. These bar situations were just bad luck, or wrong place at the wrong time, or I hate to say it, some woman, some girl.
Yeah, they're always causing the problems. But no, yeah, I mean, some guys are just like that. Like I knew guys, not, I wasn't friends with them, but if they went out, drinking, they were going to get in a fight at some point.
Yeah, I knew guys like that too, but it was more like kind of fun for them because they were the instigators and they were the aggressors. But usually, you're not expecting it. Even when people say harsh words, you're still really not expecting it. It's still a surprise when somebody like takes a swing or something like that. And when people are drunk, people don't dodge; they get hit.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the reasons why I didn't get hit, because I was rarely drunk in these situations, and it wasn't too hard to sidestep some of these people. Right. But at the same time, we were in a couple situations where there's no room. People were just all over the place, right? So I'm just like, I'm dead if like some big guy gets a hold of me. But just lucked out.
Yeah.
But yeah, as much as I love violence in movies and I love gunfights in movies and all that stuff, now in real life, shit, no.
Yeah, I think you really need to take notice of people that enjoy that type of stuff. Like there's people that like to watch these really sick videos. Like I know on Facebook, sometimes they'll just post them on like some random group. And it won't have a flag or anything in front of it, so people will watch it. It'll be someone, getting their head cut off or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that happened to me. I saw this video, and of course you can't stop watching it once you start.
Sure.
It's real horrible, but it was a Mexican mafia. What would be the right word? A cartel.
Yeah.
These guys had snitched, so they were getting their heads cut off with chainsaws.
They kill people in horrible ways, yeah. They're all about
head.
sending messages in Mexico, the violence there. It's all about killing people in the most violent, awful way ever because they want to send messages.
Oh, God, it's terrifying. It would work on me.
I know. They're shooting judges on the steps of the courthouse, and I mean, it's nuts.
We should build a wall.
Exactly. That's what we're saying. We're saying all Mexicans are terrible, violent gangsters.
I'm not saying that's the answer, but I mean, hell, I don't want that coming my way.
But yeah, getting back to just movies and stuff, I guess that's always the thing, right? Like I sort of have to do it on a movie by movie basis, whether or not I feel like the violence has a purpose or if it's just there to shock and stuff like that. For instance, there are a couple of French films that are, pretty bad, but at the same time, I feel like both have artistic merit. One is Martyrs from 2008. Like,
oh, right.
I heard about Martyrs for a long time before I worked up the nerve to watch it, and it's quite, disturbing and stuff. But by the time it was over, I felt like, yeah, that's a legitimate movie. Like, maybe it's not a high art or anything, but like, it's not just, trying to shock us for the sake of it. Like, there's something going on here. And I felt the same way about Irreversible, which has, that probably the most famous rape scene in history, where Maria Bello gets raped for 10 minutes by some guy, and it's just brutal, never cuts away. And, once the rape was over, then he viciously beats her and stuff. And, and like, it's just a movie that just shoves all that in your face. But at the same time, by the time the movie's over, I felt like, yes, this movie has a legitimate reason to exist. It's not just there to be, depraved and make you feel sick and stuff. So yeah, I just sort of had to do it sort of on a case by case basis. Cause yeah, and other times, we'll watch one of those and I'll be like, well, the whole point of that is just to try to freak people out. Like, something like Hostel. I'm not going to pick on Hostel because there's worse stuff out there, but Hostel is kind of what kind of gave a lot of this stuff momentum again for a while.
Yeah, Hostel is the worst example,
I guess, as well.
What do they call it? Porn, gore porn, something like that?
Torture porn.
Torture porn, that's it. But no, Irreversible, man, I really like that movie. I think it's a very well-made movie. Yeah. I'm a pretty big Gaspar Noé fan.
Yeah, we'll probably do one of his movies eventually on this show.
But yeah, I feel the same way. Martyrs, like you said. I don't know. It's kind of like certain scenes in that film made it really popular, but it actually is a really well-made film, in the long run anyway. Like it's, I really like the plot of that film, and the end result as well. It's really interesting. Really, a really neat idea.
Sure. So yeah, when I see like those ones that are like sort of known for being shocking or violent or depraved, it's always sort of a 50 kind of a toss up what it's going to be like. And sometimes I even get what they're going for, but I just don't like it anyway. Like Funny Games.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know what they mean in Funny Games. I understand the point they're making. I just don't like it, and I don't care.
I don't really like either one. I've seen the remake also.
I didn't see the remake.
It has Michael Pitt in it, which is, I think, the one, redeeming quality of the film.
He's one of the bad guys, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But he does a great job, but I just not a fan of the film.
Yeah. Well, I've seen the original, same sort of thing, and again, I get what they're going for, and I'm not gonna just tear it apart or anything like that. But it just, for me, I was just like, oh, okay, no, this all felt pointless. But I get what their point is. You watch these movies for the violence, so it'll give you violence, but not in the way you expect, and it's not going to end the way you expect. And I get it. It's all about sort of subverting people's expectations, blah, blah, blah. And that's fair. That's fair enough. I'm not going to come apart on it. Like, some people get so offended and mad at these films. They're just like, oh, this twisted bastard made this. No.
Well, that's kind of why I dislike the whole Hostel and all the copycat films that followed with Hostel, because that's really all it was. It was, here's a bunch of, exploitive violence, and it's all wrapped up in a crappy movie.
Yeah.
And it's not even that bad to begin with. It's not that graphic to begin with.
Right.
I had a really bad day one time. I think I saw in the theater, I saw what's the Australian one that was right around that same time? You probably know
Oh,
what I'm talking about.
shit, I know what you mean. Why can't I think of it? Something Creek?
Wolf Creek.
Wolf Creek.
I think I saw Wolf Creek and Hostel on the same night, like as a double feature, at the movie theater, and I was like, oh man, it's what the hell's happening?
Yeah. I know how you feel. Because, I mean, it's the same sort of thing happened with the Saw series. Like, the first Saw, you're like, okay, I kind of get it. The
Yeah.
second Saw is just really bad. But you're
Mhm.
like, well, maybe that's just a misstep. And then by the third Saw, you're like, okay, this is all this is.
Yeah. Yeah. Saw. Yeah, I think Saw's a little bit better than some of those, but
Oh, I think so.
not a whole lot.
At least it tries to have more of a plot. Although
Mhm.
it's, I'm not going to get into it, but it's another one of those movies that breaks its own rules, which drives me nuts.
Mhm.
Because there's plenty of times where Jigsaw is not doing what he says he's going to do, like where he talks about like, oh, if you really want to live, you'll get through it or something like that. But that's not true. There's definitely a few times where he's just, and other people say, well, that's the point. They're showing that he's a hypocrite. I'm like, well, if he's a hypocrite, then everything is pointless. But anyway.
The funny thing about the Saw movies is he's been dead for like half the franchise.
Yeah. But
He's
it's
done
like
all
he's
of
the
this,
ultimate planner. He still manages all this time later, leaving tapes everywhere. It's like
and he
like
has all these accomplices and these apprentices that are doing it and for him and stuff.
what's funny is I still kept watching them. And Saw 4 I actually enjoyed, and then Saw 5, which happens at like the exact same time. That's kind of the twist, is that 5 happens around the same time as 4, or something like that. Or no, the twist is that 4 happened at the same time as 3. But anyway, so 5 follows 4, and I hated 5, so it destroyed all the goodwill. Because I felt like 4 was finally picking some things up and making things interesting again, and then 5 just seemed to shit all over it. But that's my.
Is
And then
that the
I don't.
last one?
No, they made a 6, and then I think they made 3D, and then they made Jigsaw. So
Jigsaw. That's the one I saw recently.
yeah, I haven't seen that one. That's the one where he's been dead for 10 years already. But 3D was supposed to be the end point, and I never actually bothered. But I probably will just for the hell of it at some point. Although by then I won't remember. As I've said before, the only thing I'll give the Saw series is that they are big on continuity. But that's mostly lost on like the people that were watching them. You know, every Halloween a Saw movie would come out, and people would be like, "Oh, let's go see Saw," and then it would like reveal all this stuff that had to do with the last one. But then you'd forgotten.
Right.
So the best way to watch the Saws, honestly, is just back to back to back to back. Because at least that, if you're into it, because at least that way you can appreciate how the continuity lines up, because they really do pay attention to it and make it matter. And that's the only thing I'll give it.
If you're really into torture, you can torture yourself by watching all of it.
Exactly. Watch all the. I don't know. If you aren't wiped out already by 3, because 3 is like 2 is really bad, and you're thinking, man, that's bad, and 3 is even worse.
Yeah, I gave up at 3, and then I saw Jigsaw. So
I would say 4 is a lot better than 3, but by that point, who cares? And again, I felt like they ruined it. I was like, okay, 4 is actually a lot better, and then I thought 5 was really crappy.
And then they made 3D, and then say 5. And was 3D part 6 then?
3D was 6, and it was supposed to be the end one. And then Jigsaw, I guess, is some sort of epilogue, or I don't know. Or is it actually a flashback or something?
It is a twist there, too. It's happening at the same time as one of the other ones. Yeah.
Which isn't good, because they already did that. The first time they did that, fine. You don't do it again, for Christ's sake.
It jumps around. It's not present day, I know that much. It's,
exactly.
Somewhere around the same time as the other ones.
Yeah.
Did you find out that he died of cancer? Did you find that out in the other films?
Yeah, because I mean, all along, that was what was eventually going to happen. That was one of the reasons why he just started doing all this shit, was because he was dying of cancer.
Is that it? Okay, I thought it was his wife died of cancer or died of something.
Yeah, but he was dying of something. In the third one, he had some chick that him and an accomplice kidnapped so that she could like do a brain operation on him. But by the end of 3, he's still dead, and yet he still has done all these things. So yeah, by the end of 3, he's dead.
Because Shawnee Smith comes in at some point. I think she's maybe in the first film, but she becomes an accomplice.
Yeah, she's in 2 and 3. At the end of 2, it's revealed she's an accomplice, and then 3, you see her helping him. She's the one that kidnaps this doctor and forces her to operate on him, which still doesn't wind up working. And then once 4 ends, you realize it was happening at the same time as 3, which was a fine twist at the time. Like, I'm not gonna... And then, yeah, I feel like 5 just undoes all the good... For me, personally, 5 undid all the goodwill that 4 had built up. Especially considering, like, it had a character I thought was kind of decent, and then they just wind up making him a big loser in 5. It's like, yeah, you're just another guy that can't get out of the trap. You make all the mistakes. Because that's the other thing. You always have him, like, saying... He's always saying in the tape, remember to do this. And then, of course, they never do it. And they're always, like, such... Like, one of the things in 4, like, one of the lessons is, like... It's like this black guy who's like one of like the SWAT team members.
Yeah.
And the whole lesson is about like something about like not just rushing in or something like that, or going through doors. And of course that's what winds up killing him by the end is like, if you're in the area, he just pushes through the door. I don't know, some bullshit. It's like, oh, it's learning a lesson. It's like, he's not learning a lesson. He's dying. He's getting murdered. Anyway, they have to, you know, justify it somehow.
Well, and it was so like, different on the, you know, the different crimes in his eyes that people had committed. You know, they weren't really justifiable to each other. Like they weren't, you couldn't really measure it. It's like one guy would like rape a baby and the other guy like cheated on his SATs or something. And it's like,
and they both get equally gruesome, awful deaths. Yeah. You're both going to be slashed apart by razor blades over a 6-hour period. I want to play a game.
We're going to slowly slice your Achilles tendons for like 24 hours.
Yeah. By 3, it was just ridiculous. Like, you're going to put this murder box on your face. It'll come apart, it'll put drills through your ears and tear your jaw off and send your brain up to the sky. And they do show, like, yes, he was an accomplished engineer, so he could do this shit.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, they have to show that at some point.
Yeah. It's good to know that's the type of things that you just see him writing the blueprints for, like, brain buster box, or shoes that inject, like, you know, nails into your ankles.
He just takes an old pair of Reebok pumps.
Pump it up.
Wow. We just talked about the Saw franchise for a long time.
Sorry, Ingmar Bergman. You deserve better, sir.
we brought this episode into the toilet. But yeah, I think I've seen Persona, Seventh Seal, and this film. So that's the 3.
I would recommend Magician to you. It's not one of his big ones either, but it's interesting and it's entertaining. And the Spring, yeah, Virgin Spring. I mean, you pretty much know what's going to happen in it, but it's a decent ride. You know, some people have talked about the rape scene in that, but I didn't find that disturbing at all, really, as far as rape scenes go. But some people say, like, oh, the fact that it's black and white or something. I don't know. Some people have said, like, that one hits them more than I guess everybody has different sensibilities for these things. I mean, yes, it is a rape scene, but I mean, it's fairly quick. You know, it's not like a long drawn-out affair like Irreversible, which is really making a point of it. But no. Well, anyway, I just mean I wouldn't avoid the movie for that reason. It's definitely good. Wild Strawberries. I don't know. I will rewatch it, but I think you would probably feel the way I felt the first time. I felt it was just, you know, I understand how it's a good movie and well done. It just didn't have much going on for me. It was just sort of felt like it wasn't that long, but I don't know. It couldn't really keep my attention. I kind of drifted a bit in watching it. But trying to look back at the filmography to see what was an early one. Because, yeah, a lot like Kurosawa, he was making movies as early as the 40s, but it wasn't really till the 50s that he became kind of, I guess, a well-known filmmaker. Seventh Seal being his big breakout in 57, although he certainly had some success before that. But, you know, from Seventh Seal on, it's just sort of like hit after hit. Through a Glass Darkly, I'm interested in seeing. It's another one of his sort of family dramas, which I think is, again, kind of a little bit like an Ibsen play, from what I've heard about it. But it sounds pretty good. It also has Max von Sydow in it. But you've got a woman who's got schizophrenia, and I don't know, there's at some point where she thinks she's talking to God, and God is like a big spider and stuff. It sounds pretty cool. So that's another one that's been on my radar. And now since I probably knew this before and forgot, but as I said, Hour of the Wolf was followed up by 2 movies, Shame and The Passion of Anna, which are kind of supposed to be like make up sort of a thematic trilogy. So that makes me kind of want to seek those out just to see how they line up with this one.
I take it back. I've seen Cries and Whispers before also.
Oh, okay.
And I like that one.
Yeah. That one, again, to me sounds a lot like an Ibsen type thing, because you got like family and people together. The faith, the female psyche, and the search for meaning and suffering. Academics said that, but yeah, I want to see that. Yeah, I haven't seen that. I want to see it. Most people seem to think that 82's Fanny and Alexander were sort of like his last great movie, although he would continue to make movies for quite a while after that.
Yeah, very prolific. 71 acting credits. I mean, directing credits.
Yeah. The thing about Fanny Alexander is that it's super long. And there's 2 different versions. There's one that's just like a 3-hour movie, and then there's like a longer version that's like a miniseries.
Oh, yeah, I see that. It's the same, it's just different cuts?
I am not sure. I think so. Apparently, apparently the 300. Yeah, let's see. The production was originally conceived as a miniseries and cut in that version, spanning 312 minutes. But yeah, they say eventually they did a 188-minute cut version for cinematic release. Television version, but yeah, the television version has since been released as a complete film. The 312-minute cut is one of the longest cinematic films in history.
Wow, that is a long movie.
312 minutes? Holy Jesus.
5 hours, 12 minutes long.
It's nuts.
But probably not intended to be watched in one sitting either.
Yeah. I don't think I've seen any longer than that as far as cinematic ones go. On the list, it's near the bottom. No, I haven't. Oh, I guess O.J. Made in America got a cinematic release. I didn't know that because it's on the list here. 7 hours 43 minutes.
Is that the John Travolta one?
I don't know. I watched it, but I watched it, on TV in parts.
See,
I don't think I saw all of it. No, that's not the John Travolta one because I don't see his name anywhere.
Oh, I'm looking at that's the inside look. The People versus O.J. Simpson.
But the one that's on the list that now that we're onto this, that I always want to watch is that Holocaust one, Shoah. The documentary from the 80s about the Holocaust. I've seen clips from it and stuff, but it's supposed to be like one of the best documentaries of all time.
When was that made?
85. Well, it was made basically through the 80s. I think it took them years to make it. It's so many interviews with so many people.
9 hours 26 minutes.
Yeah, 566 minutes. Holy shit.
That's something probably everyone needs to watch. At once.
At once.
No, once. Like
one. Oh, okay.
Add that to my list. I love stuff like that. It's just you can't be in that mindset for a very long time, or you'll just really feel terrible.
Yep. Yeah, and then you see they got films that were released in different parts. For instance, I watched Nymphomaniac that way. I watched Nymphomaniac in the 2 parts.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's a movie that was worth seeing once, but I would never watch again.
I've kind of thought about watching it again, to tell you the truth.
Really? I don't think I would.
Quite a bit.
But as we said before on the show, we should probably eventually do a film by that filmmaker, Lars von Trier or whatever, because he has some interesting films for sure, and some very sort of polarizing ones.
Yeah, he's done some stuff that's really hard for me to watch, but also films that I like a lot.
I just haven't really seen his stuff, to tell you the truth, even though I've heard of it. I think that's the only one I've seen. Is Nymphomaniac.
The Bjork was in
Of course,
one
the
of
big. Yeah, I do that.
and
Cancer in the Dark, isn't it?
yeah, that's it. That's a hard one to watch too, man. That's a sad one.
Yeah, I like Brooke. She's super good, I think. But Dogville's one of them is definitely really maligned. Like people hate that movie so much.
Dogville was okay.
That's the one with Nicole Kidman, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those.
I think it's the other one, the other blonde Australian, Naomi Watts.
No, Dogville's got Nicole Kidman.
Oh, does it? Okay, I'm sorry.
Paul Kidman, Lauren Bacall, Paul Bettany, Chloe Sevigny, Stellan Skarsgård, who's in most of them, James Caan. But yeah, I don't know. Most people seem to think Dogville is just too nihilistic, just because everybody in it is so terrible. Like, there isn't like one redeemable character in the bunch. Like, just everybody's awful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's long.
Yeah.
It's almost 3 hours. Just short of 3 hours. But I do kind of want to watch it. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe Dancer in the Dark would be good to do. I know Europa is kind of interesting sounding.
I mean, have you seen what's his film with Klaus Kinski? The one that's like one of his earlier films.
Okay.
God, why can I not think of that?
I'll find out. It's not The Element of Crime. Is it Epidemic? Man, I can't find it.
I'm thinking of Werner Herzog. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I like Werner Herzog, and yeah, I like his, with Klaus Kinski, he did that cool remake of The Vampire.
Yeah.
Nosferatu the Vampire. That's a really good remake. So yeah, down the road, yeah, I'd like to do something by Lars von Trier.
Yeah,
he seems like such an interesting sort of polarizing figure.
Melancholy, I wasn't that impressed by.
That was one that for the longest time I was going to watch on Netflix, and then I just didn't bother.
If you have any desire to see Kirsten Dunst nude, that would probably be the only reason I would say watch it, but otherwise. Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen her nude in, say, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yeah.
I don't know about Melancholy. I remember once I met somebody years ago who was obsessed with her character from that movie, and I was like, I can't even remember her in that movie. I mean, I do now, but she's like she's not a super important character. They were like, oh, I was so in love with her. I just want like the character. I just thought she was so cool. I was like, okay, I guess that's an interesting takeaway from that movie. She's a side character, you know. It's not, I mean, she's not a bad character, but yeah, I was just sort of surprised. But yeah, Bergman's very first film was a film called Torment from 1944. And it's kind of funny because the title and the way it reads, it sounds like a Hitchcock film. Tale of Sex, Passion, and Murder was originally released as Frenzy in the United Kingdom. It sounds like they were just going for a Hitchcock thing there. That's kind of funny. But yeah, that was his first ever film, 1944. Yeah, I don't really recognize most of the titles. And like I said, it's really once he did The Seventh Seal that he started really doing his big ones. Wild Strawberries came out the same year as The Seventh Seal, and both were just massive, massive hits. And really started to, I guess, give him the reputation as a great filmmaker. And I would agree. There's a lot of stuff he does that I think he does better than a lot of people. I think I told you once before, not like a year ago, I was reading some article, and it was talking about it was talking about Kubrick, and it had a link to a thing that showed an excerpt from like a letter that Kubrick had written to Bergman. As you said, it's probably a little embarrassing for Kubrick because he probably never figured people would see it. And it's like the whole letter is just him just like really kissing his ass and saying how wonderful his films are and how much he wishes his films could be half as good, and just like how amazing this guy is and how if only he could be as good as him, and he tries so hard in his films to be as good, but he knows it never will be. Like, it's like Jesus. But yeah.
Yeah, Stanley Kubrick was quite the fan of writing letters to people, wasn't he?
Yeah. Old Kubrick.
He's a funny guy. Yeah, he's an eccentric guy for sure. Which I don't think it's any spoiler. We are going to be doing a Kubrick film at some point in this series.
Yes, we are.
I think
again, maybe not the one you would expect, is what we can say for that. As we whittle down the options for that.
If you guys have any suggestions, please feel free to let us know on Twitter. But yeah, talking about Kubrick, they're re-releasing 2001 in a month or so, I think, getting a fairly wide release.
Oh, that's awesome! I hope I can see it. It's one I've never seen in the theater.
I'm definitely going to watch it if I get a chance.
Yeah, and that reminds me of another point I was going to make early on. Is this movie came out in 1968? That was a hell of a year for film, man. Mm-hmm. That was the year 2001 came out. Planet of the Apes came out. Night of the Living Dead, watershed moment for horror, came out. Not as big, but we did do a show on Targets, which was 68. Rosemary's Baby, another big moment in horror, 68. So, yeah, 1968 had a lot going on. And this film too, although again, it's not considered one of the bigger Bergman ones. It's certainly a worthy one. Yeah, a lot of great important movies in 68. My favorite probably is 2001. I really love that. Bought the book not too long ago too, the folio version, which is pretty cool. Seems like a crime that I don't own 2001 yet, since I'm such a big fan of movie we did not too long ago on the other show, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, mm-hmm. which is in many ways, really influenced by 2001.
Yeah, that was one of the earlier Blu-rays I picked up when it first came out. Looks fantastic.
Yeah, I'd imagine. Came on TCM recently, and I didn't tape it, which is too bad. Should have. But there's been a lot of good stuff on TCM lately, and I can't tape it all. For instance, The China Syndrome was on tonight. I didn't tape it, but I know we talked about it before. I would really recommend seeing that one. It's a really good movie.
With Jane Fonda?
Yep.
Yeah, I've seen it. I watched it again after you had mentioned it again. Yeah.
I don't know. I just find that really arresting. Like, the whole movie just really grabs me for whatever reason. Mostly because it's Jack Lemmon. I think Jack Lemmon was a super good actor. Mm-hmm. Just every performance he gives just really, I don't know, I just really feel grabbed by him. I don't know if it's just he gives a really sincere performance or whatever, but yeah, I've just sort of noticed that about him. And probably in that movie more than anything else. Although I know a lot of people will point to say, the one from 92. Of course, now I can't think. But, it's fairly famous about the salesman and stuff. It has Alec Baldwin going into the
Glengarry Glen Ross?
Yeah, Glengarry Glen Ross.
Yeah, I think that's what my generation knows as Jack Lemmon, but he was actually, as a younger man, did all that great stuff that I still need to watch a lot of it.
My generation knows him from Grumpy Old Men.
From as Gil, in a sense. Oh, Gil's gonna get him again.
Yeah, Gil on The Simpsons is basically just an allusion to him on Glengarry Glen Ross. The Gil character is a good character. He filled the void of Lionel Hutz
Yes.
I miss Lionel Hutz. And the last episode with Lionel Hutz in it is one of his best ones. The last one is the one where Marge joins the realtor office and becomes a realtor. Lionel Hutz is the one that recruits her, and she's trying to sell houses and stuff, and she winds up selling a famous murder house to the Flanders, and she's all worried about it because she didn't tell them at first. And Homer buys Snake's car at a police auction.
Huh. Oh man!
It also has a part where Homer is singing the first line to the song "My Name Is Luca." Really weird. Now that's sad. People want to get sad. My name is Luca.
We lost
Great
Phil
song.
Hartman. Too young.
Yeah, that really makes me sad. Very tragic.
Terrible way to go too.
Oh, I know. So many of these other guys, I'm not saying it's not any worse, but I mean, he was murdered. You know?
By his wife.
By his wife.
Yeah.
I think to this day, what's his name? John Lovitz still blames Andy Dick for that.
Yeah, I think so.
Because he said that Andy Dick, she was getting better, and Andy Dick reintroduced her to cocaine and got her doing drugs and stuff again. And apparently they had a big meeting on the set of News Radio, because the whole thing was John Lovitz took over his spot. He said he was my friend, so he'd want me to step in. So he was the new guy in News Radio, and the first day he was there, he went up to Andy Dick and told him he blamed him and stuff or something.
Oh yeah, do you remember just a few years ago they got in a fight?
Yeah,
at a restaurant or bar or something. I mean, so yeah, he still feels that way, I think.
Yeah, would have liked to have seen that. I know it's a serious issue, but I think it probably would have been kind of enjoyable to see those two fight.
Yeah. I love John Lovitz too, but not. Yeah. I mean, it's just imagine what all Phil Hartman would have done, if he hadn't have died. I mean, he wasn't necessarily a young man, but it was fairly early in his career,
Yeah. I mean, he could have done a lot of those roles that, they gave Eugene Levy over the years, for instance. I mean, I love Eugene Levy. What I always tell people is my duty as a Canadian is he's not just this typecast guy that everybody sees in movies. It was, the dad in American Pie. He's really funny, and he's in lots of other good things, and yet most people don't know. So
he's from SCTV.
Yeah, exactly. He's awesome.
Yeah.
But Phil Hartman, I think actually one of my favorite movies is the last thing he ever did was he recorded the dialogue for The Cat in the English dub of Kiki's Delivery Service. Because that's a movie that came out in '89, but it was in the '90s that they did the dub, and it was that was the last thing he did, was he recorded. And what's interesting about that is that's one of the main differences of the movie, is that The Cat has completely different dialogue in the Japanese version.
Really?
And they made him they basically riff off, his own, sensibilities and sense of humor. And so The Cat basically has lines, sort of based on Phil Hartman. The Cat's a much different character in the English version than the Japanese version. The Japanese one, he's just sort of more of a supportive sidekick character, whereas in the English dub with Phil Hartman, he's more sarcastic and stuff like that, and has better jokes. So yeah, I actually do have his last ever performance because I have that movie.
I'm not familiar with that one, but I'm looking at it now.
Yeah, it's nothing amazing. It's one of those movies that doesn't really have any sort of conflict. It's just a movie, but the idea is when a witch turns 13, she has to go off on her own for some goddamn reason. So she goes off to this city, very European type city, and she sets up there and she starts making new friends and blah blah blah. But anyway, Phil Hartman in the English dub is her cat, and he has some of the funny lines. But yeah, the movie doesn't have any real conflict. Everybody's really nice to her, and everybody likes her, and they make friends and stuff. But it's still an enjoyable movie. It's a Ghibli film, it looks gorgeous and stuff. But yeah.
Trying to think. There was a film Eugene Levy did where he was just like really attracted to black women.
Is that The Man?
It's something. Yeah, maybe
Is that the
it.
one he did with Samuel L. Jackson?
That may be it. Yeah, I was trying to find it here.
I didn't see it, but that sounds like it could be it because there's this one called The Man where it's like he and Samuel L. Jackson are like paired up for some reason. You know, compare and contrast. It's like badass Samuel L. Jackson and super lame white bread Eugene Levy.
I haven't seen it, but I just remember the previews and like talking about like big black booties and stuff.
Yeah,
and I was like, man,
he's one of the ultimate examples of that. Late '90s, early 2000 thing where it's like get the whitest people ever to say, gangster stuff, and it'll be hilarious. Straight tripping, boo, shit like that.
Perfect example. Perfect.
Yeah. Right up there with the rapping granny.
Oh, man.
Bring on the rapping granny.
Yo, 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 yo. Wow. So next week we'll be doing The Man. Starring,
yeah, we're going to have to interrupt our Master series and get to this The Man and have Eugene Levy talking about luscious black asses. It needs to be done. But yeah, we can wrap up. We'll just say, I don't know, what's what I'm looking for, or whatever, of psychological thrillers. I think Hour of the Wolf is a worthy one. It's got some things that make it stand out on its own, and probably set the template for some of the later movies that come. As I've said, if somebody has watched Persona and enjoyed it, this movie, again, to me, is a movie that's kind of similar issues, just depicted in a very different fashion, which I think is kind of cool. But as I said, it's made me curious to track down the other two that are supposed to sort of directly follow it, and do that in the near future. Try to watch and Ingmar Bergman this week. I didn't really get to do much over the weekend because it was the Easter weekend and my parents were here. But over the next few days, yeah, I'm hoping to watch a couple more Ingmar Bergman films, including maybe The Magician. You should try to watch The Magician if you can. It's a fun movie. It's not really as deep as, say, something like this. It doesn't have really big themes or anything. It's just more sort of an interesting little story. It's more at least what I got out of it anyway. It's just, And yeah, I would say Virgin Spring is worth a watch at some point. There's not really any surprises there, but it's certainly a well done movie. But I think for you personally, out of the ones you haven't seen and the ones I have seen, I would say Magician might be the most interesting. Not amazing, but a fun little movie for sure.
So
someday, although probably not soon. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The ones you said that go with Hour of the Wolf is, sorry, I had it in front of me. That was Shame, and what's the other one?
Hold on. I have it too. Shame and The Passion of Anna.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, so they're supposed to be kind of like a thematic trilogy, which is something I've mentioned I am kind of really interested in and obsessed with, and maybe another show in the future will do some of those. I know there were a couple I pushed for, so maybe doing on the Sausage Factory sometime, but I don't know if we'll ever get around to them.
We kind of deal with similar, I mean, I know they have the same actors in there, but similar subject matter as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so they're more tied up than I thought, yeah. Yeah, and they came right after, too. They were both from 69. Or no, yeah. Shame was also 68, and Passion of Anna was 69. So, they were all made within a close proximity to each other. Swedish drama, explores moral decline, self-loathing, violence, and political involvement, blah, blah, blah. Oh, Shame looks like it has, like, a lot more stuff going on. Because it's got, it has, war stuff. So that sounds kind of cool. Probably less minimalist. Hour of the Wolf is definitely sort of a minimalist film. You basically have kind of two locations, more or less. You've got you have the artist's little house, then you have some landscape in between, and then you have the haunted castle, or whatever you want to call it. But a good example of minimalist filmmaking. And sometimes I don't know if I point this out too much with black and white movies, because I know they don't always do it. But once again, I thought it was another good example of light and shadow done pretty well. There's especially some really good scenes in the castle where characters are kind of cloaked in darkness when they're talking and stuff that looks really good and adds to the effect. And actually, at the very end, that's what Alma is. She's basically cloaked in darkness, and then when she finishes talking, it's almost like she gets swallowed up by it for the ending, which is pretty cool. I'm not trying to overstate it. It's not an amazing thing. I suppose any filmmaker could do it, but I just thought I'd point out that I thought it's done pretty well. But I guess that can finish off for Ingmar Bergman. So we're not entirely sure which of our masters will be next. It could even be Kubrick. We're not sure, but Kubrick is coming up. Ozu is coming up, and at least 2 or 3 others are ones we've mentioned too, and we will announce that. And as I said, now that at least for me, things are a little more back on track. I had a bit of a weekend where I didn't have as much time to do stuff, but hopefully I'll be a little more on track, and we can announce sooner than usual, or at least sooner than lately, what the next film will be. Give you guys at least a little bit of heads up than we did today. So yeah, look forward to that very much. Certainly enjoying getting to see some of these older films and world stuff. So far so good. So yeah, we'll let you know.
Sounds good. And thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned to Twitter for any news and upcoming films. And feel free to give us any suggestions or recommendations on there, or just your general thoughts. And,
yeah, always. Thanks a lot for being with us, and we'll see you soon.
All right, thanks, guys.
Peace. Later.